The sky above Ornithka cracked like a burning filament, ribbons of light veining the firmament in shades of blue so intense they hummed. Cassian Rook craned his neck to admire the show, boots crunching in the pale, reactive dust as he was marched forward by three particularly humorless aliens wearing armor that looked suspiciously like the outer shell of a coffee grinder. One of them poked him with the blunt end of a plasma pike, which hummed just loud enough to be dramatic but not actually dangerous. Theater, he decided. Lots of theater here. This would be a good time to say something noble, he muttered to himself. Maybe something about freedom. Or socks. I miss socks. The tallest alien, the one with a single glowing eye in the center of her forehead and shoulder plates that could double as surfboards, snorted softly but didn't respond. Cassian liked to think she was warming up to him. She hadn't stabbed him yet. That was practically a hug in some species. They reached the ceremonial platform, a vast slab of obsidian alloy hanging over a chasm that pulsed with distant green light. Dozens of Valkyrie warriors stood in perfect formation around it, silent and motionless as statuary, save for the faint hiss of their breathing through those creepy dual-lobed masks. At the center of it all stood General Zelfra. Cassian had seen her file. Genetically engineered, multi-lobed cognition centers, reactive musculature, 3 confirmed planetary subjugations, and a gaze that once caused a diplomat from Kriven to faint into his own gelatin. She was imposing. Terrifying. Weirdly elegant. And she had the posture of someone who had never once in her life considered sitting down for fun. Her voice boomed, augmented through a field amplifier that gave her words the gravity of small moons. You stand before the Valkyrie Dominion. You represent a species known for chaos, for laughter, for jazz. You will kneel, as is custom, and be recorded as the first human to acknowledge our order. Cassian cleared his throat. One of the guards leaned over and whispered something urgent in Valkyrie, presumably suggesting they remove his kneecaps to simplify matters. Zelthera raised a hand and silenced the guard with a flick of her fingers. Cassian exhaled slowly, looked up at her, and smiled. No. It wasn't a loud word. Not a shout. Just a gentle syllable, rolled off the tongue like a joke that only he understood. There was a sound. Not from the sky, not from the chasm, not from the soldiers. It came from Zelthera. A sharp exhale. A faint ripple at the corner of her mouth. And then, something impossible. She laughed. Not a cackle, not a giggle. More like a bark that didn't know what it wanted to be. She caught it halfway out and tried to smother it with a cough. Her troops shifted uneasily. A few masks tilted. One of them, Cassian noticed, actually flinched. The High Witness, a spindly alien in flowing synth-silk robes, gasped so hard his secondary lungs audibly inflated. Violation of protocol. I sneezed, Zelthera said, not even looking at him. Cassian tilted his head. That's your sneeze. Sounds like an earth hyena falling downstairs. I am unaffected, she added, very stiffly. Continue. Right, Cassian said. So about the kneeling thing. I have some issues with that. Mostly anatomical. And philosophical. And also because my pants are too tight. There was a pause. Then, just barely, Zelthera's mouth twitched again. Do you defy the will of the Dominion? She asked, tone strained. No, no. I just decline to kneel. I'm happy to sit. Maybe lean. I'm an excellent leaner. Ask my chair. Her eye narrowed, the central pupil flaring like a dying star. You mock us. Cassian held up a finger. Not you. Just the idea. The whole kneeling thing. It's a lot, you know. Especially when you have chasms involved. I have weak ankles. There's a liability risk. Human humor is not welcome here. Good thing I brought my own, he said brightly. It's biodegradable. Zelthera turned slightly away, her hand behind her back curling into a fist. Cassian noticed the guards were beginning to fidget. One of them, possibly the shortest, was clearly suppressing a laugh. His shoulders were shaking in exactly the way that said, "I am deeply afraid of my superior officer, but this guy is objectively funny." "The ceremony is sacred," Zelthara said. "Deviation is chaos." "I mean, yeah. But sometimes chaos is where all the good ideas come from. Fire. Music. Marshmallows. I'm not saying you need to throw out tradition. Just maybe, spice it up. Add a limbo stick." "Limbo stick," she repeated, as if trying to translate it into something less ridiculous. "You bend backward under it," he said. "Way more interesting than kneeling. You guys would crush limbo." Another pause. Zelthara turned her head slowly and regarded him. The eye glowed faintly, but not menacingly. More like curiosity. Or a cat that had just seen a cucumber. "I should have you atomized," she said. "Yeah, but then you'd never know how the duck joke ends." This time, the small guard snorted audibly. Zelthara slowly turned her head and stared him down. The guard froze. "I sneezed," he said helpfully. Cassian spread his hands. "I think we're all catching something here." Zelthara raised a hand. The guard stepped back. The platform shifted, angling slightly downward. For a moment, Cassian thought it might eject him into the abyss. Instead, she stepped forward, so close he could see the faint shimmer of heat from the circuitry etched beneath her armor. "You intrigue me, Cassian Rook. That's either the beginning of a romance or a death sentence." She extended a hand, not in greeting, but in a strange diagonal arc, fingers twisted inward, palm exposed. He copied it, best he could, and immediately twisted his wrist. "Okay, that's not a human-compatible gesture," he winced. "I might need a brace." She studied him, unreadable. Then she turned her back, walking away. "Take him to the analysis wing," she said. "Subject him to full neurocultural profiling." Cassian blinked. "Is that code for dinner?" She didn't answer. But as she stepped down from the platform, he heard it again, a sound like a grin trying to escape a fortress. Another laugh. And somewhere, deep in the chasm, the light pulsed, as if the world itself had found something new to smile about. Cassian Rook sat strapped to a levitating chair that glowed faintly purple and made a sound remarkably similar to a cat purring through a vocoder. Every 5 seconds it hissed, adjusted height by an inch, then settled back down with a whimper. It had been doing this for 27 minutes. He'd counted. Twice. Across from him floated a translucent cube filled with what he could only assume was a living consciousness, since it blinked occasionally in an embarrassed shade of green whenever he looked directly at it. The analysis chamber, officially known as the Neurocultural Assessment Nexus, looked like someone had let a particularly philosophical jellyfish design a hospital. "Subject Rook," came a voice, neutral and unamused, from the ambient sound gel woven into the chamber walls. "Please relax your occipital ridge." "I would," Cassian said cheerfully, "but I left it in my other trousers." A faint flicker of disapproval pulsed through the cube. "Humor is not required. Neither is breathing, technically, but I've grown fond of it." The purring chair hummed in agreement, then rose 6 inches and jolted back down like a smug elevator. The cube floated closer. Phase 2, Lexiconeural Resonance Mapping. Subject will repeat after me. Cassian squinted. "Is this like therapy?" "Because if so, I should tell you up front, I blame my parents, the education system, and gravity. Not necessarily in that order." "Repeat, Srethkalinam Varanzentha." Cassian coughed theatrically. "I'm sorry, did you just insult my spleen?" "Repeat, Srethkalinam Varanzentha." "Is this how you guys say, hello, or summon the apocalypse?" There was a short, sizzling pause. Somewhere in the corner of the chamber, a small speaker crackled and played a Valkyrie chime usually reserved for minor system errors or spilled beverages. New instruction: subject will remain silent while the reso-vocal calibration proceeds. Cashin leaned forward, face grave. Okay. I'll behave. The cube's hue shifted to a cautious blue. Proceed. He took a deep breath, then delivered with all the gravity of a Shakespearean actor in 0G. Sreth Kali Nam, Varan Zentha. I'm a little teapot, short and stout, asterisk. The cube blinked red. The room dimmed. A siren briefly howled, then coughed itself into shameful silence. Inappropriate semantic insertion detected. Cashin looked up innocently. I'm just improvising. You know, jazz. You previously indicated ignorance of jazz. Oh, I know what it is. I just pretend not to. It maintains my mystique. Subject's neural pattern exhibits high degrees of linguistic disorder, associative misdirection, and recursive sarcasm. I'm flattered, he said, bowing as much as the chair would allow. It responded by gently flipping him upside down. Whoa. Okay. That's new. Postural inversion is part of the resonance recalibration. Tell that to my breakfast burrito. The cube drifted in closer. General Zelthara has authorized accelerated testing protocols. Because she likes me, he asked, now dangling vertically like a human punctuation mark. Because she is concerned you are contagious. Cashin gave his best upside-down shrug. I mean, technically, everything's contagious if you try hard enough. The cube did not respond. Instead, a section of the wall shimmered and dissolved, revealing a narrow corridor filled with what appeared to be rotating sensory mirrors, a fog of logic gas, and one very confused in turn trying to pick up a spilled tray of memory wafers. You will proceed through the clarity pathway, the cube said. Attempting to deceive the corridor's illusions will result in hilarious misadventures. Cashin offered. Identity fragmentation. Close enough. As the chair released him with a wet slurp, he stumbled toward the corridor, ducking under a low-hanging orb labeled perceptual integrity, handle with existential care. A faint scent of lemon accompanied a brief burst of disorientation, followed by a talking mirror that immediately accused him of being unoriginal. He paused. All right, mirror. You want original? How about this? What do you call a sentient artificial intelligence that keeps forgetting its password? The mirror flickered. What? Amnesia.exe*. It cracked, visibly. The silver rippled with laughter. By the time Cashin emerged on the other side, his hair was charged with static, his socks were glowing, and he had adopted a small, sentient orb named Blip who followed him because it found his speech patterns refreshingly chaotic. Zelthara stood waiting, arms folded behind her back, half shrouded by a kinetic fog wall. The aura of the general still carried authority like a gravity well, but now Cashin noticed the faintest twitch at the edge of her mouth. Like her face was resisting something. Report, she said. I survived, Cashin said brightly. Also, one of your mirrors is clinically depressed. And this is Blip. He likes knock-knock jokes. The orb bobbed twice, chirped, and whispered, knock knock. Zelthara ignored it. I was told you encountered complications. Oh, you mean the identity fragmentation? Yeah, for a second there I thought I was a sandwich. But I pulled through. She stepped forward. You refuse protocol, mock sacred rituals, and now you destabilize my analysis nexus. In my defense, your analysis nexus started it. She was close enough now that he could see the faint glint of circuitry in her collarbone. Why? She asked. Cashin tilted his head. Why what? Why, laughter? Why reject order? He let the question hang. The orb blinked sympathetically. Because, he said finally, in all the stories we tell, the ones that survive aren't the ones about obedience. They're the ones about the fool who made the king laugh. The idiot who saw through the curtain. The stubborn idiot who said no, and meant it. Zelthara said nothing. Her eye pulsed, once. A long moment passed. Then, very softly, she said, amnesia.exe. Cassian blinked. Wait, was that a callback? I am, learning. From above, a speaker chirped twice. General, Council demands update on subject Rook. Zelthara pressed 2 fingers to her comm line. Inform the Council, he remains under observation. Cassian grinned. Do I get a badge? You get confinement. I'll settle for a t-shirt. Blip spun in delight. And though no one dared say it, deep in the ducts of the assessment nexus, the air recycled just a little warmer, like the station itself was trying not to laugh. Cassian Rook sat on a platform that hovered exactly 3 centimeters above the lab floor, bobbing gently like a moody duck. Around him, translucent panels projected shimmering diagrams of his brain, his dreams, and, apparently, his taste in breakfast cereals. One of the panels blinked uncertainly between cinnamon hail clusters and quantum bran, as if even it couldn't decide which was more absurd. Zelthara stood nearby, arms clasped, gaze fixed not on the data but on Cassian himself. She had summoned him at an indecent hour for what she called, emotional vector analysis. He had shown up wearing a robe, mismatched boots, and what might have once been a hat but was now largely symbolic. I'm not saying your scanner's broken, he said, sipping from a cup of something the machine claimed was coffee but tasted like ambition and printer ink, but it just told me I'm 90% metaphor. You are resistant to conventional profiling, Zelthara said. Even the empathy simulators refuse to work when you're in the room. I have that effect on small appliances and ex-girlfriends. She didn't react, though the assistant droid behind her spasmed slightly and released a puff of glitter. Cassian raised an eyebrow. That new? Experimental. Zelthara gestured toward the hovering interface. Today we analyze the neurological structure of humor. Cassian perked up. You're studying comedy? She nodded. I have downloaded 5,000 hours of Earth-based humorous content. He leaned forward, wary. What kind of content? She gestured to a floating screen, which immediately played a grainy video of a man slipping on a pie. That's not, okay, that's slapstick. Is it not humor? I mean, yes, but it's the shallow end of the pool. Humor's deeper than that. It's nuance. It's timing. It's the thrill of almost saying something and then saying something else entirely. Like, wait, do you know about sarcasm yet? She turned slowly. Define it. Cassian cleared his throat. Okay, picture this, I'm about to be vaporized by a death drone, and I say, asterisk, well, this is just the relaxing vacation I needed. Asterisk. That is, a lie. Exactly. But in a fun way. Zelthara frowned. Your species uses intentional dishonesty to produce pleasure. Now you're getting it. Her expression didn't change, but her posture shifted just slightly. Her fingers tapped a rhythm against her belt. I will require examples. Cassian grinned. Brace yourself. He jumped off the platform, took a step forward, then immediately smacked into an invisible barrier with the comedic timing of a seasoned mime. He slid down the barrier slowly, leaving a face-shaped smear of indignity. Example 1, he groaned, picking himself up. Unexpected physical tragedy that doesn't actually hurt. Zelthara tilted her head. And this is, desirable? Only when the pain is emotional. Or deeply silly. The barrier dropped. You are permitted to proceed to the humor interface. Cassian squinted at the glowing door that shimmered open. Inside, a circular chamber awaited, lit by rotating holograms of comedians, trickster gods, and something that looked suspiciously like a chicken in a space helmet. The center of the room housed the humor core, a spherical AI designed to isolate, analyze, and eventually synthesize human laughter. At least in theory. In practice, it resembled a disco ball that had achieved sentience and was deeply disappointed by it. Cassian Rook, the sphere announced, voice haughty and nasal, "You again. Have you come to violate another of my calibration subroutines with puns?" Cassian smiled. "That depends. Have you installed a groan filter yet?" The sphere rotated, flashing in exasperated pink. "Proceed with input." He leaned forward. "Why don't aliens trust stairs?" Silence. Even the lights dimmed slightly. "Because," he said, "they're always up to something." A long pause. Then the sphere buzzed. Analyzing, pun structure detected, groan level high, effect, mild amusement with secondary irritation. "I call that a win." Zelthara stepped into the room, studying the results. "You measure laughter by groan level?" The sphere sniffed electronically. "Groans are indicators of involuntary engagement. A laugh is just a groan wearing a tuxedo." Cassian clapped. "Now that's comedy." Zelthara circled the humor core. "Your culture uses absurdity as a deflection." Cassian shrugged. "We use absurdity because life is absurd. The universe is a giant blender full of rules, chaos, and exploding desserts. You either cry about it, or you laugh before it explodes." The sphere blinked. New input received, universe as blender metaphor. Humor potential, moderate. Suggest further testing with metaphorical kitchen appliances. Zelthara turned back to Cassian. "What makes you laugh?" He opened his mouth, then paused. "Ah. Okay. That's trickier. Explain." "Because laughter isn't always about funny things. Sometimes it's about being alive. About surviving something you shouldn't have. About realizing you're still here, even if everything's broken and upside down." Zelthara stood still for a long time. Then, quietly, "I have never laughed." Cassian didn't reply immediately. He let the silence stretch, let the room acknowledge the weight of what had just been said. Even the humor core dimmed its lights respectfully. "Well," he said, "finally, you came close that day on the platform." Zelthara glanced at him. That was an anomaly. It was a beginning. The humor core beeped suddenly. Observation, tension levels rising. Suggested action, insert duck. A side hatch opened, and a small mechanical duck waddled into the room, quacking in binary. Cassian blinked. "What is that?" The core purred. "Emergency levity unit. Programmed for comedic disruption. Name, Glorp." The duck spun in a circle and tooted a celebratory fanfare. Cassian burst out laughing. Zelthara watched him, still unreadable, but her shoulders loosened just slightly. Glorp tripped on its own wheel, performed a perfect somersault, and landed in her footpath with a chirp that sounded like Tada. Cassian gasped. It stuck the landing. "I do not understand why this is funny." "You don't have to," Cassian said, still grinning. "You just have to let it happen." Zelthara looked down at the duck. It blinked up at her, unthreatening, ridiculous. And then, just for a moment, her mouth twitched. The humor core flared gold. New data registered. Micro-expression, upward mouth shift. Category, proto-laughter. Alert, the general may be amused. Cassian pointed dramatically. "I knew it." Zelthara raised an eyebrow. "Remove the duck." "Ah, come on, it just got here." "Remove the duck." "Fine. But it's going in my memoir." Glorp whirred sadly and rolled away. As the chamber powered down, the light softened. Cassian turned to leave, then looked back. "You know, General, it's okay to laugh." Zelthara didn't answer. But behind her, the humor core softly whispered, "Tada." The gravity gardens were not what Cashin expected. He thought he'd be escorted to a manicured field of glowy alien flowers and inspirational rocks. Instead, he found himself standing ankle-deep in a thistle-coated plane that periodically shifted angles based on some mysterious internal logic. One moment he was walking on a gentle incline, the next moment the ground had casually flipped 90 degrees and decided wall was its new identity. This place was designed for physical meditation, Zelphara said, appearing beside him with the casual grace of someone who never fell downstairs. It is meant to test both body and perception. Cashin was currently kneeling sideways. Not spiritually. Literally. Right. So, question. Is this gravity normal or is the floor just gaslighting me? The gradient shifts to confuse your spatial instincts and purge habitual patterns. He raised a hand. Congratulations. It's working. I no longer remember which way is down, what shoes are, or whether my spine is trustworthy. Zelphara didn't respond. She moved ahead, her armored boots finding perfect purchase on the shifting surface like a cat trained in geometry. Cashin stumbled after her, trying to look vaguely philosophical. So, he said, catching up. This is what passes for a walk in the park here. It is a place of discipline. Of self-realization. Valkyrie warriors come here to confront the limitations of their mind. Back home we just eat too much and yell at reality TV. She halted near a spiraling obsidian tree whose branches swirled upward in defiance of all logical physics. The tree emitted a soft hum, like it was meditating just to show off. Cashin leaned on a root. It retracted. He fell over. Again. I invited you here, Zelphara said, because you interfere with my discipline. He blinked up at her. Wow. That's almost a compliment. It was not. I'll take what I can get. She crouched beside him. Not as an act of submission. Just practicality. Her expression remained unreadable, which Cashin had begun to realize was her default setting, somewhere between imperial judgment and puzzled by Earth pizza. You destabilized my behavior. This concerns me. Yeah, that seems to be my thing. There was laughter. From me. It was beautiful, he whispered dramatically. I cried. The duck cried. The humor core still won't shut up about it. She studied his face, searching for some underlying pattern. Some intentional manipulation. Instead she found chaos. Improvised and unscripted. A thing not trained or bred into being. I spent 40 years studying the neural codes of command, she said. I memorized the conflict philosophies of 7 species. I can disassemble a plasma war cannon in 9 seconds. Cashin nodded. Okay, well I can recite the entire theme song to Galaxy Bus 9000, backwards, while eating nachos. Zelphara paused. What is, nachos? Hope, salt, and bad decisions. Silence hovered. Then the ground tilted again and Cashin face-planted into a bed of lichen. You are an anomaly, Zelphara said, not unkindly. He rolled over, brushing moss from his teeth. And you, dear General, are learning to be weird. That's progress. A new voice interrupted them. General. It was Advisor Ken, drifting across the garden on a hover disc that made an unhappy squeaking noise every few seconds. There is unrest among the western clades. Laughter has begun to spread. Zelphara straightened. How? Unauthorized access to Earth media nodes. Several trainees have begun quoting Earth stand-up routines. One was overheard shouting asterisk, that's what she said. Asterisk during a simulation. None of us know what it means. Cashin grinned. It means your society is evolving. Ken turned to Zelphara. This is dangerous. The Dominion thrives on focus. If soldiers begin doubting discipline, they might start enjoying themselves. Cashin offered helpfully. Ken ignored him. Permission to initiate neural correction protocols. Zelthara didn't answer immediately. Her fingers twitched, betraying some unseen inner conflict. Finally, she said, denied. Ken sputtered. General. This contagion, she said slowly, has not yet proven lethal. Cashin raised a finger. In fact, it might be curative. Ken made a noise like an airlock trying to scream and zipped away, muttering about discipline rot and the end of orthodoxy. As the hover disk vanished into the mists, Cashin leaned toward Zelthara. You just protected humor. I did not protect it, she said. I postponed its execution. He smiled. Progress. They walked farther into the garden, the terrain slowly stabilizing. At one point, a tree tried to handshake Cashin with a root tendril. He shook it, naturally. Then the tree let out a satisfied chirp and slithered back into the ground. Your world is strange, he said. But not in a bad way. More like a soup that shouldn't work but does. Zelthara said nothing. She was gazing upward, toward a translucent dome where the sky flickered with stars, real and simulated. Valkyrie constellations arced across the firmament in foreign patterns. Cashin, she said. He blinked. That's the first time you've used my name without a prelude of irritation. Your presence shifts things. I've always considered myself a shift happens kind of guy. She didn't smile. But her voice, ever so slightly, softened. I find that I do not mind it. Cashin exhaled. Careful. That almost sounded like affection. She stepped away, avoiding the comment. We return to the Citadel now. There is more to learn. I hope one of the lessons is how to walk without being flipped by terrain. He offered her an arm with a theatrical bow. She looked at it, puzzled, but accepted it after only a moment's hesitation. And together, they strolled toward the edge of the garden, her posture proud, his relaxed, the gravity only shifting once, as if even the garden had decided to give them a break. For now. Cashin Rook was being declared a contaminant. He sat in a chair that was either a high tribunal seat or an especially judgmental coffee machine, he hadn't figured out which yet. The walls shimmered with judgment. Dozens of Valkyrie advisors formed a crescent arc around him, each standing in sleek armor that gave them the aesthetic appeal of militant cutlery. Infection is spreading, droned one of the older ones, a counselor with a forehead like a weathered canyon. Laughter incidents have risen 41% among base units. Improvisation was detected in combat training. One warrior challenged his instructor to a Yo Mama duel. I still don't understand what that is, said another counselor. Neither did the instructor, came the reply, but he has not spoken since. Cashin raised his hand. In my defense, humor improves morale, builds cohesion, and makes waiting in line slightly less murdery. You stand accused, thundered the central voice, of introducing destabilizing emotional contaminants into the Dominion's emotional grid. Wait, you have an emotional grid? Like a spreadsheet? Yes. Do you color-code feelings? Is rage red? Is mild social awkwardness yellow? The room was very quiet. Cashin smiled. That wasn't a joke. That was genuine curiosity. General Zelthara, the lead counselor turned. You brought this entity into proximity with Dominion hierarchy. Explain. Zelthara didn't blink. He disobeyed a command in a sacred rite. He disrupted standard protocol. He also made a tree laugh. A few heads turned. I mean, if we're blaming people for arboreal giggles now, Cashin said, we might want to reflect on the tree's needs too. The counselor narrowed his eyes. You see. Even here, he erodes decorum. Zelthara didn't respond immediately. She stepped forward. Calm. Balanced. Possibly amused. No one could tell. Cashin Rook did not erode decorum, she said. He challenged it. He exposed a flaw in our system. The council erupted into hisses of static debate. One counselor fainted theatrically, but landed softly thanks to a hover pillow that deployed with a disappointed beep. Flaw, someone spat. Emotion is not a flaw, Zelthera said. Control without understanding is not strength. It is brittleness. Discipline is all, someone muttered. Cashin raised a hand. With respect, if discipline means living without ever laughing, then your empire's been constipated for centuries. That's a medical metaphor, Zelthera explained quietly to the others. Cashin nodded. And a truth bomb. The lead counselor leaned forward. You think you can reform the Dominion with puns and pratfalls? I think reform starts when someone powerful admits they don't know everything, Cashin replied. Or at least that not everything needs to be grim and dramatic. Someone in the back accidentally chuckled and tried to disguise it as a cough. The humor core, patched in via speaker 4, emergency semantic monitoring, immediately chirped, asterisk laughter detected. Zone, back left. Offender, unidentified. Sound quality, suppressed joy. March 10th, asterisk. Zelthera lifted her chin. Permission to assign Rook as temporary liaison. The tribunal blinked in unison. You want to legitimize this nonsense vector, the lead demanded. He is not a threat, she said. He is a comedian. Exactly. Cashin grinned. I prefer morale architect. The chamber went silent. Then the counselor issued his judgment. Very well. Assign him a role. Limited scope. Observation only. Should humor spread beyond acceptable containment zones, he is to be isolated and, if necessary, neutralized. Cashin whispered, yikes. That escalated. I'll keep you alive, Zelthera said, flatly. See, that's romantic. In a, please don't murder me, kind of way. Do not push your luck. As they exited the chamber, Cashin turned to her. I'm a liaison now. Like, officially. Do not celebrate. Too late. I'm already planning my business cards. Asterisk Cashin Rook, diplomatic hazard. Available for weddings and interstellar crises, asterisk. She didn't answer. They walked in silence for a while. The corridor hummed with soft lighting. Somewhere, a janitorial drone accidentally triggered an uplifting soundtrack cue. Neither of them acknowledged it. You defended me in front of your entire governing body, he said. You were in danger. He nodded. So that means. It means I am invested in the experiment. That's the coldest way to say, I care, I've ever heard. I do not care. Right. Sure. You just accidentally undermined the entire Valkyrie ethos to save a comedy virus. She glanced sideways. You are more effective than I anticipated. I get that a lot. Later that day, Cashin received his uniform. It was mostly ceremonial, featuring an impractical sash and a helmet shaped like a question mark. He wore it proudly. Blip the sentient orb hovered around him making sarcastic beeping noises. His first assignment as liaison. Deliver a stand-up routine to a group of young Valkyrie cadets. He opened with a bit about gravity malfunctions and accidentally created a minor revolution. But that, of course, was another chapter. Cashin Rook stood inside the memory spire trying not to sneeze. It wasn't the solemnity of the place that triggered it. It was the air. The spire was filled with a particulate mist that shimmered with ancestral data and also, apparently, pollen from some kind of ceremonial lichen. Don't touch anything unless instructed, Zelthera said. He itched his nose with great theatrical restraint. Define touch. She ignored him and stepped into the central chamber where memory nodes, hovering crystal spheres the size of beach balls and twice as judgmental, drifted in slow patterns like cautious jellyfish. This structure contains the encoded life experiences of every high commander, she said. Their triumphs. Their training. Their thoughts during battle. It is the Valkyrie Sacred Archive. Cassian squinted at a node pulsing violet. Does it include what they had for breakfast? Sometimes. Food affects decision-making. Well then I hope no one went into battle hungry or mid-brunch. Zelthara raised her hand to a node that hovered before her. The surface glowed. Light spilled outward, forming a web of memories around her, a mosaic of her life rendered in moving thought. Cassian stepped forward instinctively, then remembered the "don't touch" rule and mimed zipping his hands into his jumpsuit. The node displayed her early conditioning, images of her as a young recruit in a rigid line of identically armored Valkyrie, reciting mantras of obedience while balancing on poles over shifting plasma fields. One slipped and was promptly vaporized by a disciplinary drone. Cassian winced. And I thought my school had strict hall monitors. Discipline was survival, Zelthara said. Deviation was danger. The node pulsed again, showing her first command. A narrow escape from orbital destruction. Her voice, even younger, issued calm orders while fire rained from the sky. Her hands didn't shake. Her eyes didn't blink. You were a machine, Cassian murmured. I was expected to be. He watched her watch herself. There was something strange about it, like she was studying a stranger who shared her face. The next pulse showed her initiation into the general's echelon. She stood in front of a tribunal, declared loyalty with perfect cadence, and was awarded her rank through neural branding, an event that made Cassian's scalp crawl just watching it. Remind me not to apply for a promotion here, he muttered. Humor deflects discomfort, she observed. Humor survives discomfort. Zelthara turned to him. You make light of pain. Not to erase it. To carry it. Her eyes narrowed. And what of your pain? He smirked. Mostly poor fashion choices and a tragic inability to dance. She did not blink. He sighed. Fine. You want truth. I ran from a dozen wars back home. People were always yelling. Planets always burning. I cracked jokes because the alternative was screaming. Or silence. Humor was how I reminded myself I was still a person. Silence followed. Not an awkward one. A space being made. I have never screamed, Zelthara said. Then you're due for both a primal yell and a proper giggle. She turned back to the node. The next sequence began. It showed the ceremonial platform. The moment she told him to kneel. His refusal. Anne. Her laugh. The sound echoed within the chamber. It played back from every node. It ricocheted off the crystalline walls, amplified by the memory spire itself. Every echo, every resonance, it was cataloging it as significant. That moment, she said, her voice quieter than he'd ever heard it, changed my neural rhythm. The memory core marked it as deviation. Good, Cassian said. If your culture never deviated, you'd still be hitting rocks together and calling it war strategy. That laugh was beautiful, he finished. The spire pulsed. A new memory formed, not from the archive, but from now. Cassian kneeling. Not in surrender. Not under command. Just kneeling beside her as she watched her life. A shared silence. A mutual absurdity. She looked down at him. You kneel now. I kneel for no empire. But I do kneel for a moment that matters. And this does. He nodded. More than most things in the universe that pretend to. She stared at him. Something shifted. Not a smile. But a kind of softening in the jaw. A release of breath. Then she did something no Valkyrie had done in the memory spire since its construction. She knelt. Beside him. The nodes went still. No light. No motion. Just awe. Blip, who had been silently hovering above them disguised as a decorative light fixture, emitted a soft ping that sounded suspiciously like applause. Cashin glanced up. "You saw that, right?" "Confirmed," Blip chirped. Two subjects, crouched voluntarily. Emotional impact, unprecedented. Memory quality, meme-worthy, Did you just say meme-worthy? Blip is adapting, Zelthara rose first. "We must go. Back to the Citadel?" "No." She turned toward a side chamber, one only accessible by generals and state historians. "To the Sub-Thought Archive. There is something older. Hidden." He stood, brushing phantom dust from his pants. "Secrets, huh? That's our thing now." "We are not a thing." "Well, not yet. But wait until I show you Earth's comedy duels. You haven't lived until someone insults your haircut with a rhyme." They stepped forward together. Behind them, the memory spire's nodes blinked once, slowly, reverently, before dimming. They had just recorded the first mutual kneeling in Valkyrie history. And no one had exploded. That, in itself, was worth remembering. The hallways leading to the Sub-Thought Archive were shielded by logic gates, actual sentient gates that demanded riddles before opening. Cashin had only made it through the first three because Zelthara answered for him, albeit reluctantly. The fourth gate insisted he explain the emotional paradox in a 13-dimensional sonnet. He responded by reciting a limerick about a sarcastic neutrino. The gate opened, albeit while sighing audibly. "I think I'm winning them over," Cashin said, twirling in place as the lights adjusted to their neural rhythms. "They're warming to my poetic stylings." "They are programmed to recognize futility," Zelthara replied. "And lower their standards." Cashin offered a low bow. "And yet, here we are. A warrior general and her comedic parasite strolling into the sacred neural basement of a warrior civilization." She paused. "You make it sound romantic." "Well, that depends. Are we technically trespassing?" "No. I hold full clearance." "Then never mind. Just feels more dangerous if we're not supposed to be here." A door unfolded itself into a spiral and gently expelled a cloud of neutral gas, which Cashin immediately sniffed. "Is this what Valkyrie call fresh air?" "No. This is archival breath. It slows metabolism and stabilizes memory resonance. It smells like old socks and regret." "That's accurate." They stepped into the archive, a vast cylindrical chamber where thought strands, thin cords of encoded memory, spun lazily through the air like bored lightning. Cashin ducked instinctively. "Do not let them touch your skin," Zelthara warned. "Some carry emotional residue. Stronger minds can resist." He stepped carefully. "And what happens to weaker minds?" "They giggle uncontrollably for 3 hours, then cry about the color blue. I've had relationships like that." Zelthara approached a dormant node pulsing faintly in ultraviolet. "This was sealed before I was born. Access requires dual cognitive imprint. Let me guess. 1 part grumpy war general, 1 part lovable chaos goblin. Something like that." She placed her palm against a panel. The strands brightened, converging toward her. Cashin hesitated, then reached up to mimic her motion. As his hand touched the panel, it sizzled slightly, as if uncertain what to make of his emotional profile. A beat passed. The node unraveled. A projection unfolded, grayscale at first, then blooming into color as the data reconstructed itself from the recesses of time. A Valkyrie commander, older than any on record, stood before a council, not unlike the one Cashin had faced. The figure was tall, grim, but not humorless. There was something in his eyes. A flicker. An unspoken joke. He was speaking, though the language was archaic. Blip, who had stowed itself as a shoulder brooch, translated in real time. We are not machines. We were never meant to forget laughter. It is not weakness to feel. It is weakness to deny the fire that forged us. Asterisk. Cassian blinked. Wait. That guy said it first. This was suppressed, Zelthara said. Erased. Or attempted to be. The memory continued. The commander was stripped of rank. His voice was silenced. But others in the council chamber shifted uncomfortably. One even smiled. Then the node pulsed once and collapsed into itself, scattering into a million fractals. Well, Cassian said. Looks like you're not the first Valkyrie to laugh. Just the first one to get away with it. She didn't reply. Her hand remained on the console, eyes following the dissolving echo of that ancient defiance. This changes everything, she said. And yet I'm still not allowed to wear my comedy hat in public. You should never have worn that at all. I disagree. It completes me. She faced him. Cassian, if this knowledge spreads, you'll have a full-blown laughter revolution on your hands. Or civil war. He tilted his head. Right. That too. She began to walk, slowly, deeper into the archive. This wasn't just hidden. It was buried. Someone feared it. Probably someone who didn't understand how dangerous joy can be. You think joy is dangerous? Everything powerful is dangerous. Love, hope, a really spicy burrito. She shot him a glance that may or may not have meant, what is a burrito? He continued. You've seen what humor does. It breaks rhythm. It opens people up. It makes them see. Not everyone wants to be seen. Especially those holding power. A silence followed them, not of unease, but of acknowledgement. They reached a smaller chamber, circular, with no doors. Just strands of red light weaving in tight spirals. Zelthara approached the center and knelt. Cassian stood awkwardly nearby, unsure whether to imitate her again. I brought you here, she said, not because I knew what you'd find. But because something in me, something I didn't recognize, wanted to. Cassian blinked. You're confessing. I do not confess. You just did. I am issuing a tactical disclosure. He sat beside her. It's okay to care. I do not. You also said that before kneeling next to me in the memory spire. Just saying, your record is getting a little inconsistent. A pause. Perhaps inconsistency is not failure. Now you're starting to sound like me. I find that concerning. They sat in the stillness. Then, softly, a low tone echoed from the room. One of the memory strands coiled down and hovered before them. It showed a moment, brief, quiet, of two Valkyrie soldiers sneaking away from training to tell each other improvised jokes. No war. No duty. Just two people finding laughter before the dawn of a brutal campaign. The memory faded before revealing their fate. Cassian reached up and touched the strand gently. We've all been trying so hard not to break, he said. But maybe breaking is how something better gets in. Zelthara stood. Then it's time we stop hiding the pieces. When they left the archive, the gates asked no riddles. They simply opened. No sighing. No protest. As if they, too, had seen something worth remembering. Cassian Rook stood on a stage made of reconstituted satellite fragments and ceremonial alloy, wearing a robe that had once belonged to a council elder and now looked suspiciously like a bath towel with shoulder epaulets. A crowd of over 3,000 Valkyrie warriors and citizens stretched before him in absolute silence. Somewhere in the distance, a mechanical duck named Glorp waited for his cue. No pressure, he muttered to himself, adjusting the translator node in his ear. Zelthara stood beside him, arms folded, expression impassive except for the barely perceptible twitch at the corner of her mouth. It was, by now, her signature tell. Her version of a standing ovation. Cassian took a deep breath and tapped the mic crystal embedded in his collar. It sparked once, dramatically, then buzzed in protest. "Hey there, Valkyrie," he said. "Or as we say on Earth, hi. I come to you as a former hostage, accidental diplomat, professional deflector of tension, and part-time stand-up philosopher." Silence. He cleared his throat. "Right. Tough crowd." One lone cadet near the back snorted. Cassian pointed. "See, that one gets it. That's the sound of progress." He walked slowly across the platform. "Months ago, I was dragged here for refusing to kneel. Not out of pride. Not out of rebellion. But because I didn't believe fear should be the foundation of any relationship. Not between species. Not between people. And definitely not between someone and their breakfast options." Several audience members blinked. "That was a joke," he added. "It's okay to laugh." A ripple moved through the crowd. A few chuckles. One warrior tried to hide it with a cough and failed. "I came from a world full of noise," Cassian continued. "We joke to survive. We joke to connect. And you, Valkyrie. You taught me that discipline isn't the enemy of joy. It's just been lonely without it." He looked at Zelthara. "And you, General, taught me that even the strongest minds can be curious. Even the fiercest leaders can change. Even if they pretend they haven't." She didn't blink, but she tilted her head in a way that unmistakably said, "Proceed carefully, human." He turned back to the crowd. "You all think laughter is dangerous. It is. But so is trust. So is vulnerability. So is choosing to be more than what you were told you had to be." Glorp, on cue, rolled forward, did a pirouette, and released a confetti burst from its side compartment. Cassian raised a hand. "This is your future. Right here. A dancing duck and an exasperated general who now knows what a pun is. You can cling to the old ways, or you can embrace the hilariously unpredictable possibility that you are more than your programming." Silence. Then one counselor. An older one, with ceremonial medals and the posture of someone who hadn't bent in 3 decades, stood and said, "Define, pun." Cassian grinned. "With pleasure." Later, when the crowd dispersed, some laughing, some stunned, a few deeply confused but strangely optimistic, Cassian sat on the edge of the platform with his legs dangling over the edge. Blip hovered beside him, projecting a tiny replay of Glorp's confetti dance on loop. "I think it worked," he said. "It did," Zelthara replied. "Mostly. You know, when I first got here, I figured I'd either get disintegrated or turned into some kind of comedic houseplant. You still might." He looked over. She was smirking. "Barely. But it was there." "You're not the same," he said. "Neither are you." He nodded. "I used to hide behind jokes. You still do. But now I know why." They sat in silence. Then she asked, "Do you regret kneeling?" Cassian paused. "Not for a second." He stood. "I'm due back on Earth soon. Delegation swap. Protocol says I have to bring someone with me." Zelthara raised an eyebrow. "I was thinking maybe someone with a battle record, a confusing sense of formality, and a recently developed sense of humor." She folded her arms. "Blip is occupied." "I meant you." "I know." She said nothing for a long moment. Then she extended a hand. "I will observe Earth culture. For tactical purposes." He took it. "Of course." 3 weeks later, in a small cafe on Earth filled with soft jazz and holographic menus, Zelthara watched a barista spell her name as Zelfarna for the 3rd time and muttered something very unambassadorial under her breath. Cassian laughed. "You're adapting beautifully." "I have not yet screamed." Give it time. She sipped something that was legally considered coffee and tilted her head at a nearby table where a group of humans were telling jokes. Why do they laugh at failure? She asked. Because failure is human. And laughter makes it less scary. She considered that. I still do not find ducks inherently funny. Glorp, now wearing a novelty hat, quacked in protest. You'll get there, Cashin said. They raised their cups in an unspoken toast. To peace. To absurdity. To the possibility that somewhere between war and wisdom, between discipline and chaos, there was something worth kneeling for, not in submission, but in shared recognition. And to the dangerously contagious idea that even the fiercest empires might one day laugh. Or, at the very least, grin.